going to begin the first session of this morning, and we're going to have session D1, Global Water Technology and Waste Solution. Joining us, coming on live stream, we have Ms. Liz Wong, Deputy General Manager, International Environment Development Group. Please welcome Liz Wong.
Hello, everyone. Morning. It's an honor for me to attend the meeting and introduce our group IEG and manufacture Soltech here. I will share my PPT. First of all, we have a quick overview of our group. IEG is an international high-tech environmental protection group. The technology, we have a technical center, research institute, and the design institute under the group. And we have 100 industry-leading patents and know-how in the fielding of industry sewage, garbage disposal, solid waste, recycling utilization, and decentralization wastewater treatment plants. For the equipment, our group has an industry-leading environment protection group, protection equipment manufacturing base, Soltech, which has the capacity of independent develop and manufacturing. Our product have a CE certificate and win international bid. For service, our group have a professional construction operation and service team, as well as online service platform. This is our chairman, CEO, Henry Yu. In 1992, he created this company. From the very beginning, our task is to improve our living environment. This is the core power. This is the competitive advantage of our group. This page shows our layout of environmental management, including industrial wastewater, in recycling utilization of water environment in village and towns, high-end equipment manufacturing, treatment and recycling utilization of hazard waste, technical and operational services. This picture further shows our core competence. Then next part is I will give more detailed introduction about our company's qualification, order, R&D, and innovation. We have provided service for UN for 20 years, and we have been supplying wastewater treatment plant and the solar power generation system to UN for almost 10 years. So we are the only global long-term UN supplier in the world, the largest supplier of the United Nations in China. And this is our award. Besides, we have more than 140 patents, including invention patents, utility model patents, and the international patents. This is our certificate. This is a modular wastewater treatment equipment. Is designed for UN. That's we supplied to UN for almost 10 years. This is our solar power generation equipment. This picture is about our technical team, our laboratory. This is our technology and innovation. Our technology can be applied in industrial wastewater and waste-leachate treatment, decentralized wastewater treatment equipment, domestic kitchen garbage, recycling of hazard waste. This is the equipment manufacturing basis Soltech in Tianjin. Soltech has a very strong manufacturer capacity. We can produce 100 sets of environmental protection equipment per year. And also, our Soltech has smart and green manufacturing. This is our remote monitoring intelligence service. The status of our equipment can be remote monitored by this platform. So maintenance and operation can be controlled by the service platform. And next part is about industrial wastewater treatment and recycling equipment. I will show some cases in this part. This is one of the cases about the petrochemical industry wastewater, dry gas, and liquefied gas treatment for Sinopec Jinmen branch. And we also have a capacity of treating high difficult industrial wastewater. For example, continually activated carbon countercurrent absorption technology. That's some cases about wastewater treatment for printing, dyeing, papermaking, and pharmaceutical enterprises. This is the zero discharge technology of industrial wastewater. This technology can complete zero discharge of most wastewater. That's landfill leachate. Landfill leachate is a very important part in industrial wastewater treatment. This technology can be used in many scenarios. Landfills, waste transport station, garbage power plant. The first part is about solid waste and hazard waste treatment technology and equipment. Key series product is for kitchen waste treatment. This product, during the treatment of this product, the chicken waste will be reduced by more than 90%. Besides, we have M series equipment. This series equipment can make household garbage, plastic, shells, essential powder. And there's another series product, WTT, personalized solution. For recycling utilization, we have activity carbon thermal regeneration technology, and we will share one of the cases. Treatment and recycling utilization of alkali residue wastewater in Wuhan. That's our design for recycling utilization of waste salt. This page is also about waste salt. The last part is about decentralized wastewater and water purification products. I have introduced this kind of product before. This is the one we supplied for you, and the modular wastewater treatment plant. This is small-scale wastewater treatment plant can be designed according to clients' requirements. Here are some design cases. AO-MBBR wastewater treatment equipment, AO-MBR wastewater treatment equipment. Such a decentralized wastewater treatment equipment can be used in many scenarios. For example, household, community, UN camps. Except for sewage system, water purification, drinking water purification equipment is or another product. RICS series of drinking water purification equipment is also have the features of small scale and high efficiency. In brief, we have many products and technology in the field of environment protection. Our development vision is to becoming a leading environmental governance group in China. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Liz Wang, for the presentation. Thank you. Next, we'll be inviting our second session. The speaker would be Mr. Alex Zheng, Managing Director and Head of Institutional Banking Group DBS Hong Kong Limited, and he will be talking on the topic Building a Sustainable Future, Perspectives from Purposeful Banking. Please welcome Mr. Alex Zheng.
Good morning, everyone who are both online and offline. I'm actually very honored to be able to speak to you and share with you on this, to me, I think, is one of the most important, critical, and imminent focus of us today, given what's happening to the world, all this deterioration in climate and our environment recently. So you all know what is building a sustainable future, but you may be interested to know what does it mean by purposeful banking. As you know, as a bank, which is a commercial entity, we all strive at making profit. But to us, we do think that making profit is not the only objective of our existence. We do believe that we have a purpose to serve. So purposeful banking, in other words, is doing banking with a purpose for our customers, for the business community, as well as for the society. I remember a few years ago, we have an ambition in the bank to become the best bank in the world, which we did successfully, honored by Global Finance and the banker 3 years in a row as the best bank in the world. But to us, we do think that the next step for us is not just become the best bank in the world, but being best bank for a better world. And this is something that we build in the DNA of every employee of DBS, and we all strive to achieve this goal. So now let's look at how we are going to do this. As you know, the importance of sustainability in business, I don't need to explain. But here we can give some data to support that. And we do see that 80% of the corporations have actively plan with climate change, and in the mindset, they do secure 80% higher return on investment. And 90% of the companies with a strong ESG profile, they achieve equal or better financial performances. And 81% of consumers prefer to buy from sustainable sellers. And this actually not just appeal to the consumers who buys our products, but also to the shareholders, to the investors, as this is a goal that all I know you all in the investment community knows that this is something that even some funds are not allowed to invest in corporations that are not having a sustainability agenda. So in DBS, as I mentioned, we are guided by a sense of purpose to create value for the long term and by managing our business in a balanced and responsible way. And as a member of the United Nations Global Compact, we have chosen to focus on 6 sustainable development goals. And I will name a few, which is, for example, gender equality, climate actions, affordable and clean energy. So these are the major focuses that most of the institutions are looking at. And for us, we look at sustainability in 3 pillars, namely responsible banking, responsible business practices, and also, more importantly, to create a social impact. And here is our approach to the 3 sustainability pillars. Responsible banking means that we do a lot of sustainable finance. In fact, we have raised our target to $50 billion by 2024. And up to now, we actually have close to 10 billion Sing dollar of sustainability linked financing or green loans, and of which more than 60%, which is Hong Kong dollar 36 billion, are done in this place in Hong Kong. And we have also extended the product not just to loans and bonds, but even to derivatives. And we have recently completed the first interest rate swaps linked to sustainable development goals. And aside from sustainable finance, we also do banking packages for social enterprise by giving them special privileges and fee waivers. And we also promote sustainable consumption with our credit card, and then we give incentives for some of the social enterprises. For ourselves, we do practice responsible business practices and manage our environmental footprint. So we are targeted to reduce our real estate footprint in the next 3 years and also incorporate green building features. And a lot of recycling, like mobile devices, coffee grounds, beverages. And in terms of purchase, we also make it that all the vendors have signed the sustainability sourcing principles with us. And for staff, we have activities like Sustainability Week, giving trees, and so all these. So lastly, but not least, is the trying to create a social impact. And we have a DBS Stronger Together Regional Fund, which is a Sing dollar 10.5 million fund to support the communities during the COVID time. And we also awarded more than $1 million through the DBS Foundation to 13 social enterprises. So volunteer work is also one of the key focus that we encourage our employees to participate. And we have more than 9,000 volunteer hours by DBS Hong Kong on an annual basis. And we also sponsored a van that is used by the Foodlink Foundation to collect surplus food for redistribution. So now, let's come to the financing. So we are a strong advocate of transition finance because we know that not all companies can achieve carbon zero or carbon neutral immediately or in a very short future. But we do help them to go through this transition period, and then from the brown to light green, and then eventually to green finance. And for this, we are the first bank in the world to launch a sustainable and transition finance framework and taxonomy to help our customers. I know all of you are familiar with this, but basically there are 2 types of financing structure. First is that the use of proceeds are dedicated to specific projects that are green. And the other is that we also encourage corporations to enhance their sustainability achievement. So we use a sustainability link index to give advantages to customers who achieve a certain status. Then we give them rebates in interest rate or fees. So this actually helps the companies to adopt the carbon neutral solutions and also help them to become greener along the process. And as I just mentioned before, we have a 50 billion target. And then we also adopt the Equator Principles. And on top of all these financing, we are also working on creating a climate impact exchange in Singapore, which I will elaborate later. So these are our major milestones in terms of working towards a sustainability agenda. In support of sustainability, as I mentioned, we also not just do loans. In fact, the products has evolved from just simple loans or bonds to services like bank guarantee, letters of credit, and some thematic bonds, and also even derivatives. So you can see that the evolvement of the finance industry is that everything is actually working towards become greener or helping our customers to become greener. So as I also mentioned, that there are also outcome-linked financing instruments like sustainability-linked financing with rebates of fees when customers achieve certain standard of sustainability goal. And this is what I just mentioned about a climate impact exchange. And this is a platform jointly established by DBS, the Singapore Stock Exchange, Temasek, and Standard Chartered Bank. Here we provide a marketplace for projects to look for financing or cooperation opportunities for buyers and sellers. And we also provide international advisory council services for the projects. And more importantly, it is actually a platform where the buying and selling of standardized contracts backed by eligible credits, carbon credits are able to be transacted. So this is something quite interesting, which is that we also look at supply chain, and also by combining our strength in digital and sustainability to help customers. Later on, I will illustrate with an example, but basically the concept is that we do three stages. One is the certification. So the banks and the financial institutions can work with large corporates to agree on some sustainability KPIs, target setting, and we use market accepted indexes for the supplies and sourcing of goods. So this is the certification stage. And we also track and trace with our digital capability. So there's a digital data sharing between corporations, suppliers, and other ecosystem partners using APIs and blockchain technology. And we also capture environment, health, and safety data required for monitoring these sustainability KPIs. And in terms of the actual economic impact, there will be premium financing pricing for the sustainable products as long as there is transparency and accountability and traceability throughout the value chain. And suppliers meeting the KPIs also have access to preferential pricing for supply chain financing. And so this will help larger corporations in their sustainability goals. So here is one example that we work with our key partners. So you all know Sarah, which is the largest fast-moving fashion retailers from Spain. So we are helping them in the cotton procurement with financing pilot programs to spur the development of sustainable organic cotton supply chain ecosystems in India. So on one hand, we have Sarah. On the other hand, we have 2,000 farmers in India. So we are acting as the middleman to link them together. So as I mentioned before, we provide the certification from the farmer produce organization to make sure that the cottons are organic. And then we partner with Inditex to provide financing to those qualified organic cotton producers. And along the process, we do track and trace the cotton distribution, the soil testing, fertilization. So it's a series of due diligence during the process. And at the end of the day, the producers, because of the organic nature, they get 20 and 30% higher in terms of the pricing of the cotton. But on the other hand, we also provide financing to them with a subsidized pricing. So this is one example of how we walk our talk by working with partners, both large corporations as well as the ecosystem partners to help pursue this agenda. So finally, just a validation from the market, as I mentioned, that we do actively practice the sustainable financing. So you can see that we are ranked by Bloomberg in a lot of categories in terms of being a lead arranger and participant in the green use process loans, green loan participation, as well as sustainability loans. So this sort of ends my presentation and also demonstrate that we, DBS, as a bank that with a purpose, we do think that this is a very, very important agenda for us and for the future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zheng. Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you for sharing so many great works and projects that you're doing at DBS. Next, please join me and welcome Mr. Hendrik Rosenthal, Director, Group Sustainability CLP, to come on stage, and he'll be presenting on the topic Decarbonization Strategy and Carbon Asset Management. Please welcome Mr. Hendrik Rosenthal.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us join today to perhaps share some insights in terms of what sustainability means for CLP, what decarbonization means for CLP, what a net zero strategy means for us, and how we intend to get to a pathway that is indeed in line with the expectations from stakeholders, the communities, and investors as well. Let me just sort of set the scene a little bit in terms of, for those who are not perhaps so familiar with CLP, we are indeed an electric utility. We have a 120 years anniversary this year here in Hong Kong, and we have built a portfolio of assets across the region that includes a significant business and investments in Australia, in mainland China, and India, as well as in Southeast Asia. With a mixed portfolio of assets, we have indeed coal still being part of our business. We have increasingly focused on natural gas. We have built out a significant portfolio of nuclear, zero carbon electricity, as well as, of course, renewable energy, and a transmission and distribution business, which includes new energy services, as we call them. So this is sort of the scene. This is where we're at. For those who are more familiar with electric utilities, traditionally fossil fuels, and I'm sure you've seen this and heard this in the news in the lead up to COP26 next week, fossil fuels have indeed been very, very fundamental for letting us keep the lights on, for being where we are here today in this sort of auditorium with a very warm, indeed warm backdrop behind me, which it consume significant amounts of energy. And just the virtual connectivity we have here today, obviously, all relies on the electricity, the reliability, the affordability that we provide as a utility provider, as a service provider to the communities where we operate. So what is it that we need to do, though? What is our responsibility in this space? And this is where I wanted to sort of showcase, as part of the discussions today, what it is we have in place and have been working on for a number of years, what we call our Climate Vision 2050, which we initially developed back in 2007 as a strategy, as an action plan to help us reduce our reliance on fossil fuel, to set targets for ourselves as an organization in terms of how we transform our business and how we intend to do that. Now, we've updated this vision a number of times since then. We have just most recently published a new iteration of that in just at the end of September. And that really goes around considerations related to our assets, to our portfolio, to our business, but also takes into consideration the climate change impacts indeed that are coming and that we would all and are already facing, and that's the physical impacts of our business, on the business rather, and how that then moves forward as we transform our business. So what we have in place now is a strategy that brings us to net zero by 2050. And I'm sure all of you, it doesn't matter which newspaper you open nowadays, have heard of net zero by 2050, 2050 being a rather popular year, and net zero indeed being where we all need to get to as individuals, as organizations, as governments. But we have set ourselves a number of interim targets. We don't just say, well, we're going to do net zero, but we have plans in place and targets in place that by 2030 we will have a certain level of intensity, carbon intensity in the electricity that we supply to our customers that is indeed in line with the Science-Based Target Initiative, which has become the quasi-de facto standard setter for corporates to follow in terms of target setting. And then we have interim target of 2040 as well that is in line with the same trajectory. We have accelerated our commitment to phase out coal. So previously, in the previous iteration of our climate division, which we published back in 2019, we said we will phase out coal by 2050. This time around, we have come to the conclusion that A, we need to do it faster, but B, we can indeed do this faster, and there is ways that allows us to reduce the reliance on coal without interrupting or disrupting the supplies we bring, the commitments we have to the communities, to the regulators, and the different markets where we operate, including our shareholders. And we have accelerated that now to be by 2040. What's really important here is we are on a trajectory as an organization that is what you call, and this is what the science tells us, on a well below 2 degree trajectory. So that allows, if everyone were to follow this trajectory, Earth and the climate warming would be well below 2 degrees. Now, what we need to get to in order to mitigate and make sure that serious damage from the physical impacts of climate change does not indeed occur, we should all be on a 1.5 degree trajectory. We acknowledge that. We are very clear when we publish our targets. We publish a pathway to 2050 on an annual basis outlining the carbon intensity that we intend to bring to our customers, that we are below the pathway of well below 2 degrees, that we are meeting the objectives and targets that are expected from us, from our sector, from our business, but we indeed are not yet quite there at the 1.5 degree line. And this is where we then make a commitment. We will review our targets no less than every 5 years. Okay, so this is sort of the theory, if you like. I'm sure some of you will find it a little bit hard to emphasize with this sort of pathway. And there's a lot of thought and planning, strategic planning that has come into developing this. This is a commitment for CLP's assets to have a certain shape and form over the next 30 years. And this includes increasingly a reduced reliance on coal. We will increase our reliance on gas, natural gas in the short term. We will continue to build out our ability to source zero carbon electricity. That includes, in the context of Hong Kong, renewable energy as well as nuclear power. And we will indeed make sure that the different pieces really come together to allow us to set a portfolio of assets that is in line with the expectations from the market. Currently, we have about 2/3 of our operating income coming from zero carbon technologies, including transmission and retail and other non-generating activities. Our plan will be to increase that and to make sure that we have a lower reliance on, in particular, coal, but also fossil natural gas over time. So what's really interesting when you look at this trajectory, I want to go back. If you look at this trajectory here, is that there is going to be a certain phase out of coal happening, but we will continue to have a reliance of natural gas, which in itself will continue to have a carbon footprint. Now, how do we get to net zero then if we still have gas in our portfolio? And this is where the change comes in, and this is where we project real change also for us to happen here in Hong Kong. where we are in the midst of investing very heavily in building under construction the ability to source natural gas from global markets. We are building out gas turbine capabilities here in Hong Kong to deliver lower carbon electricity, but then in itself will continue to have a carbon footprint by 2050. So what do we do with these very large, very expensive assets on the way to 2050? And the strategy that we're looking at the moment, and this is a realistic expectation, that we can indeed switch our portfolio and the reliance on gas to hydrogen. The government has acknowledged this in their Climate Action 2050 plan, which they just published as well. This will be part of our transformation to help Hong Kong to become a carbon neutral, a zero carbon city and territory, and indeed our business here in Hong Kong to follow suit with that. And that is our responsibility as a partner in this space. Of course, that's not the only solution. We will indeed maximize reliance on renewables. We will indeed maximize our ability to import non-carbon electricity, and really everyone should be part and parcel of this. The feed-in tariff here in Hong Kong has really shifted the market to allow individuals and building owners to become generators. So there's a number of different pieces and solutions that come together here. In our market in mainland China, obviously, the commitment is to be carbon neutral by 2060. We will have an increased focus here, particularly on the Greater Bay Area. And that's not just on the generation side of things, but it's also about energy as a service. Our responsibility is not just a responsibility as such, but our strategy is to actually help our customers use less of our product. And we will make a business out of this. This is the transformation. This is the utility of the future. This is really the key change. It is not about selling individual electrons anymore. It is about selling a service. If you want to have your phone charged, there will be a charge for this. If you want to have your car charged, there's a charge for that. But will it be by kilowatt hour, by unit of electricity sold? Perhaps there will be a shift coming. And it's not just us here in our space, in our region that is talking about this, but that is the general trend for the electric utilities across the world. Now, in our business in Australia, huge changes expected. You may have heard that Australia now also has a climate plan, which does indeed still lack some clarity in terms of how they will get to 2050. But what is happening in our portfolio, which is a very large power station, Yallourn, we have made a commitment to phase this out early. 4 years earlier than initially planned, which is indeed what allowed us to actually update our trajectory and our target for 2030. This is a huge chunk of supply, but it's also a huge chunk of carbon that comes out of our portfolio. And it is for us to really identify together with government optimal solutions as alternatives. And that includes energy storage, which is what you need if you have increasing amounts of renewables coming into a grid. But it's also about peaking plants, and we've announced, for instance, our Tallawarra B station to be a net zero emission hydrogen and gas capable power station. So we are indeed planning and making this real already. Hydrogen is becoming part of our mix here, for instance, in Australia already. And we will build one of the largest battery storage systems there. India, increased focus on renewables. We continue along that path. Energy storage as well as transmission and distribution being part of that plan. And it's the energy as a service business, really, that's where I'd like to end up and conclude today in terms of the focus for us and our responsibility as an electricity provider, as an electric utility, to not just deliver zero carbon electricity, but really allow everyone else and create transparency in consumption and allow everyone else to really manage their own consumption better and thereby improving the energy efficiency. And for those solutions, if that's still not enough, if that's still not enough for our customers to come to net zero, we indeed at the moment have carbon offsetting solutions that we can share and provide our customers with in terms of making sure that they are on their pathway to net zero. There we go. So this is an example. This is an example of one company, of one sector that needs to move here. There is different issues here that need to be part and parcel of every conversation, and it's not just the energy transition, it's also what we call, as experts in sustainability, a just transition. And you may hear this a lot next week as well, if you will follow COP26. We can't just change industries on their own without looking after the people that work in those industries. It is not just a pure, strict business decision of cutting down or shutting one asset and replacing it with another without helping and facilitating that process by helping to build those expertise and shape real change within the communities where we operate. Everyone has to be part of it, and the jobs and the livelihoods have to come with that. So we will have an increased focus on that, as well as our commitment to net zero, and I hope everyone else does as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rosenthal, for the sharing. I really appreciate all the great work CLP has been doing as well. Thank you so much. Next, let's welcome on stage our next speaker, and he is Mr. Alvin Ying, Chief Investment Officer, BOC Group Life Assurance Company Limited, to present with us on Integrated Investment Strategy to Drive ESG and Wellness. Please welcome Mr. Alvin Ying.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to be here. I'll be using the next 15 minutes for a very brief presentation to highlight and share some of the experiences and some practical experience and challenges and the evolution on ESG investment from an asset owner's perspective. So first, let me begin by briefly talking about who we are. BOC Life is one of the leading insurance companies in Hong Kong. We are a $20 billion balance sheet, of which about $16 billion are in investment assets. We're global in nature in terms of our investments, and we are multi-asset. So our assets span from investment grade to non-investment grade fixed income, public equity, private equity, and private debt. The Hong Kong general public would probably be already familiar with our brand name as the first to launch renminbi-denominated insurance products, and we're also a leader in qualified deferred annuity policies, or QDAPs. But the general public is probably less familiar with the investment side of our business. To set the stage, let me start by briefly talking about the ESG landscape from an asset owner's perspective. Now, there are different layers and different levels to implementing ESG strategies. The first generation of ESG type awareness, if you will, is an exclusion type strategy. And BOC Life, we have long excluded certain sectors from our investable universe. Companies such as gaming and tobacco, these companies we have been excluded for a while. So this is a relatively simple way to implement a first generation type ESG policy. A second technique to build a portfolio is through a positive tilt. And by that, we mean we tilt towards industries that tend to have higher ESG scores. So we probably would underweight sectors that are bigger polluters in favor to greener industries. A third way is a more nuanced approach, and that's called best in class. And best in class means we don't so much rely on the sector tilts. We try to maintain the same industry mix as an investable universe or the indices. And but in doing so, we try for each sector to pick the best ESG implementers, the best ESG or greenest companies within their own sector. So that way we do away with the sector biases, and we also reward the companies that are leaders in their own sector. And finally, there are thematic and impact strategies. Sometimes asset owners would have dedicated portfolios towards, say, renewable energy and so on. So this is sort of the techniques that a lot of asset owners have been using so far. And then the next thing I would like to talk about is the standards. Here, this is a brief introduction to, for those who are not familiar, the different levels of certification that the EU Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation stipulate. So when we buy a mutual fund, it's now required to have a disclosure whether this product is an Article 6 product, so that's more of a mainstream product. Article 8 would incorporate some ESG concepts. And then Article 9 is a higher level, where you have more impact type investment strategies. So this is the way the EU would define the investment products. Locally in Hong Kong, the SFC also has a database where asset owners can search for sustainable or green-themed products. So what have we done at BOC Life? In addition to the exclusion type strategies that I mentioned earlier, we also have been actively researching on thematic ESG investments, and we also have been active in the green bond market. And not just in the dollar market, we also have been participating in the onshore renminbi market and both in government bonds and in corporate bonds, where green bonds are available. We have invested in those. We're also actively researching the external, working with the external rating agencies to see, how best to implement the ESG ratings to our existing portfolio. Here, let me pause a little bit and talk about some of the practical challenges running a multi-asset portfolio. In green finance, on the fixed income side, it's easier to segregate a green portfolio. So a company that is not otherwise an ESG-themed company could issue a green bond. A utility company can segregate their carbon business with a non-carbon business and using the user's proceeds issue green bonds. And then we, as asset owners, we can also segregate a separate portfolio dedicated to green bonds and then set targets, to try to increase the allocation to green bonds. There are a couple of challenges there. One, it's that there's not enough supply. There's a lot of demand for these types of green bonds, but there's not enough supply. And two, it's not quite a fully integrated strategy. You're segregating a green portfolio, but the rest of the portfolio is still stuck in the old way of management. On the equity side, just because an issuer has issued a green bond does not make it a green equity, so that you don't see the term a green equity, right? So in equity, we either use a sector tilt, like I mentioned earlier, or like I'll mention later, we'll have to use a more integrated strategy to look at the portfolio scoring. And then last but not least, I would like to talk about the returns consideration for green investment. On a fixed income side, currently the available bonds in the green bond market tend to be lower. The yields tend to be lower, so because of the strong demand. On the equity side, I think most of you have heard about how greener companies tend to be better companies, and research has shown that just having an ESG tilt does not necessarily mean you have to give up on returns. So on the equity side, there usually isn't a return give up, but on a fixed income side, practically speaking, right now, as much as we would like to increase our green bond portfolio, we are challenged by the fact that there's not enough demand, there's not enough supply, and two, the yields tend to be lower, and they tend to be issued by higher grade issuers, and that's why the lower yield. On the equity side, there's also a very important concept of stewardship. right? So if you're investing in a company that's not very green right now, how do you, as a shareholder, help guide that company become a better company, right? And here, as an insurer, we tend to have small investment teams managing a large pool of assets. And how do we get up the curve so quickly and have the stewardship needed to help all our portfolio companies? Well, that's through partnership, right? So we engage external asset managers, and we also work with we can also work with external consultants to help us with that. But outsourcing also leads to another unintended consequence is that these days all the asset managers who are out there marketing their investment products claim that they are somewhat green or it's an ESG dedicated product, but then comes the risk of greenwashing. So we as asset owners, we have to pay more attention to not just the marketing gimmick or the headline. We have to look into whether or not they're implementing these. So we may not have the resources to provide the stewardship needed for each and every one of our portfolio companies, but we at least have to make sure that the partners that we work with have the capabilities to implement these types of strategies. And finally, it's also about balance. To fully integrate ESG investment into our portfolio, yes, we can partner with external asset managers. It's a great opportunity for asset managers to differentiate themselves in front of their investors. We can also rely on external ratings, but using credit risk as an example, right? Credit risk is a well-integrated risk amongst most asset managers and banks, right? Whether it's corporate credit risk or counterparty credit risk, so most investors have a very well defined framework to govern credit risk. We want to get to that point for ESG risk and greenwashing risk as well, right? So it changes the mindset and the DNA of the entire company from product launches to how the office is managed internally, to how we manage our external partners. The fully integrated approach requires us to work with external partners, but at the same time, we still need to build internal capabilities. When we look at credit risk, right, over the years, the market has grown to recognizing certain leading rating agencies. So when we when we look at a bond, we can say, oh, this is a BBB bond or a single A bond. And when I say that, you more or less can tell, engage the riskiness of that bond, and it's very, very well recognized. But does that replace your internal credit risk management? It doesn't, right? So precisely about 14 years ago, during the financial crisis, there's been talk about how the over-reliance on credit ratings led to the lack of internal risk management models led to some of the investment behaviors before the last financial crisis. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that in ESG it's the same thing. We cannot overly rely on external ratings. So here is so I leave you with these thoughts, and I think I'm also in the panel in the next session, so I welcome some of your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alvin Ying. Thank you for the presentation. Please be seated. Thank you. So next, we're going to have a panel discussion session here on stage, and our panelists will be talking on the topic that is very interesting, related to economic recovery from pandemic while progressing on SDGs and sustainability. Well, before that, we're going to invite our moderator and our panelists to come on stage for a group photo. Please welcome on stage our moderator, Mr. Ricky Chang, Director, Head of Risk Advisory, BDO. Please welcome. Joining him on stage will be his panelists, Mr. Jeffrey Kwok, Senior Manager, International Business, Power Assets Holding Limited. Please welcome. Dr. Kevin Choi, Associate Professor, Clemson University. Please welcome. We also have Mr. Alvin Ying, Chief Investment Officer, BOC Group Life Assurance Company Limited, and Mr. Hendrik Rosenthal, Director, Group Sustainability, CLP Group. Please welcome on stage. Today, we're very happy to have Mr. Ricky Chang as our moderator, but due to social distancing, Ricky will be moderating from the chair here just beside the stage later, and we'll have the rest of our panelists here on stage. All right, a few more photos before the session begins. All right, thank you very much. Would our panelists please be seated, and would Mr. Ricky Chang please proceed to the chair here just right beside the stage and moderate the session for us. All right, now over to you, Ricky.
Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the panel discussion on day 2 of the conference. The topic today is economic recovery from pandemic while progress with SDGs and sustainabilities. So we'll have 30 minutes to discuss on the questions, followed by a 50 minutes Q&A session. So let me introduce myself. I'm Ricky Chang, Director and Head of Risk Advisory of BDO in Hong Kong, the moderator of this panel discussion. So today we are very happy to have 4 prominent speakers as our panelists. They are Mr. Alvin Ying, Chief Investment Officer of BOC Group Life Assurance Company Limited, Mr. Hendrik Rosenfeld, Director of Group Sustainability at CLP, Mr. Jeffrey Kwok, Senior Manager of Power Assets Holding Limited. Last but not the least, Dr. Kevin Choi, Associate Professor of Clemson University. So without further ado, I'd like to kickstart the sessions with the insight generated from the BDO Global Risk Landscape Report issued in June 2021. Businesses are used to having to deal with a wide range of risk and uncertainty. But the COVID pandemic created a disruption on the unprecedented level. Lockdowns across the globe shook the foundations of the world economy. BDO set out to discover how senior management and leaders cope with the prolonged uncertainty of 2020 and the main obstacles they overcame to be able to continue their operations. We surveyed 500 C-suite business leaders globally across a wide range of industry sectors to find out how they adapted their business model and reinvented products and services. According to the report, 53% of the risk-welcoming companies said the pandemic's impact had been less significant or much less significant. 53% of respondents also had global health crisis on their risk register for 2020. And 58% of those agreed that having a theoretical pandemic on the risk register helped them to manage the risk in reality. 36% of respondents mentioned that the investing in new technology, accelerating and digital transformation efforts were the major changes that the companies took to respond to the pandemic, followed by refocus on social purpose and improved environmental credits. So these insights are pretty much in line with our understanding that companies are concerning the impact of COVID on the health and safety of the staff, and at the same time willing to make investment in technology and digital transformation to enable them to quickly adapt to the changing business environments. So with this background, I would like to ask the first questions for Jeffrey. As Power Assets has more than 19 million customers globally, could you share with us how the company has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic since the health crisis began, from deploying business continuity plans to protecting the safety of your colleagues and those they work alongside, while providing the widest range of support possible to your stakeholders? Jeffrey, please.
Thank you. Before I answer the question, I just make a brief introduction of the company. Power Assets is an international investment in 8 countries with a portfolio of 10,000 megawatt of power generation portfolio and over 500,000 kilometers of electricity lines and pipelines. As you mentioned, we serve 19 million customers. By number of customers is number of meters. That means the population we serve is maybe 3 or 4 times of these numbers. So since the beginning of the pandemic, we are very cautious about the impact it will bring to our business as well as to our customers and our stakeholders. So immediately, we closely monitor the situation. We implement a lot of business continuity plan, crisis management plans, and to develop or to update all the procedures, guidelines, varies from the situation and the local industry practice and the local country's requirements. Our objective is to continue to provide our service, supplying electricity and gas to our customers during all the difficult situation during the pandemic. And we can proud to say that as of today, after almost more than 20 months or 22 months, we have still continues to provide a service to our customers, which this kind of services considered as many governments as critical services. So what measure we are doing is for employees, we have to make sure that our employees continues to work under the health and safety environments. We provide guidelines, hygiene guidelines and cleaning procedures. And of course, we provide necessary personal protective clothing, masks, and sanitaries. We, as many other companies, we allow them to work from home if they are allowed to do so. And for shift staff, we provide webinar-based shift transfer without have the need to have physical contact. And on addition, we provide assistance to our staff on counseling, financial and legal advice, and especially health advice to them. And we provide web-based healthcare and well-being programs. We also encourage our staff to take the vaccination with a very generous additional holidays and some sort of financial incentive, not only to the staff, but to the family members. So a lot of high percentage of our staff and the family members have been taking the vaccinations to protect themselves and to protect others. And we also care for our customers. While providing continued service to them, we understand a lot of them during the prolonged pandemic period has been financially suffered, especially for small enterprise and small business. So a lot of our business has established an initiative releasing package such as deferring the payment of the bills, and some of them even can written off some of outstanding bills if they are eligible on the certain classes of underprivileged people. We set up a special call center to help the EDs because, as you know, sometimes during lockdown we cannot send technical persons to the homes, and we have launched some apps, especially for the engineers, to provide support to the customers in case they are in short of the supply or of the energy. And these kinds of apps also provide medical, coping with social isolation, and well-being tips and more. And as a company, we also care for social, ESG, the social, the S. In the normal days, we provide a lot of social activities for our local communities that we serve. But during the pandemic, we cannot do it. So first of all, we enhance our normal donation. For example, in Hong Kong, we have Hong Kong Community Chest. We double our normal amount in 2020. And some of our business have repurposed the funding for social work instead of, because they cannot organize a lot of social activities. So they repurpose it to help those local communities that are in need for releasing the financial burdens. And because of the social gathering, social distance requirement, we cannot do a social service. For example, in normal circumstances, we will visit the single elderly people, but they are locked at home. They cannot going out have the normal social gathering. So we provide some sort of a web-based or call, find some volunteers to talk to them to release their isolation, psychological burdens, and see if they need to have a counseling or social services. Then we will transfer them to the social workers or even to psychiatrists. Sometimes. So besides these kind of things, besides the continues to supply electricity and gas to our customers, a lot of initiatives to combat climate change taken by our various businesses are ongoing. Of course, they have been, at some time, the progress has been delayed or deferred, but I'm pleased to inform that most of them has delivered, or all of them have delivered this progress. I would like to take this opportunity to share some of this initiative. Same as Henrik mentioned, actually, a power generation company, we need to decarbonize. So we are on track with our decarbonization roadmap. We have reduced our coal portfolio from about 50% of our generation portfolio down to 20 to 30%. In net megawatt size, it's almost 3,000 megawatts since 2016 to now, and we are ongoing. For example, the Hong Kong Electric is building a new, completed construction or commissioned the Nama Unit 10 gas-fired combined cycle unit in 2020, and they are ongoing to construction of new units. In Canada, we have converted 2 units of coal-fired power plant to gas-fired. One complete in 2020, and another one is just finished a few months ago. So we have no coal exposure of coal in OECD countries until now, and we are ongoing to decarbonize our coal portfolio. And for power generation, we have one company called Energy Development Limited, EDL, in Australia. They are energy supplier or electricity supplier for remote communities. In the old days, they are using diesel genset to provide energies. Now they are replacing them with renewables, wind, solar, and hybrid and battery storage. So one project is in a mining town in South Australia, which they have which record of more than 80 hours, or 70 to 80 hours, without the need to run the diesel gen. So they are building another 2 or 3 this kind of projects in the remote generations this now. So the progress are ongoing, and they achieve this. And also in Australia, our gas distribution network, Australian Gas Network, has launched or commissioned the first of this kind of 1 megawatt electricity electrolyzers. The name of this project is called Hydrogen Park South Australia. It's using renewable energy, wind and solar, to generate electricity to run an electrolyzer to produce green hydrogen. So the project was slightly delayed because the supplier is Siemens from Germany. The German engineers cannot fly to Australia to do the commissioning. But eventually, they tackle all the problems and have put these facilities in service, then opened the hydrogen park. Now the green hydrogen produced is not being packed or blended into the labor gas network of our company.
So thank you, Jeffrey.
Yeah. So can I continue for 2 or 3 minutes?
Okay.
So for hydrogen, actually in the UK, our gas company also working on hydrogen. One project is called X21, Hydrogen in the 21st Century. We are doing a lot of safety case studies to prepare the existing gas pipeline, natural gas pipeline that supplied to the east of the customer can be repurposed for transporting clean hydrogen, green or clean hydrogen. So the phase 1 already completed, which is on-site tests and studies and experiments. And the phase 2, which is the development of the standard procedures, operating procedures, ongoing. So they have another project called High Deploy, which is blending 20% of hydrogen into a small community, about 800 meters, into a Peel University. Also, they opened up in this summer a visiting center called Hydrogen Demonstration Home, feeding 100% real hydrogen to a home, a typical townhouse in UK, and have the public to come to realize what happens if hydrogen is feeding to our home with any change. So for the line business, actually, we are accommodating a lot of renewable generation in the system. Very technical. They have a lot of technical solutions to accommodate this, and also to tailor-make to cater for the high increased number of EV charging. Okay, so in this sense, we are working together with other industry peers and the banking sectors and academics to hopefully to reach zero carbon or the COP26 or whatever numbers to reduce to help the work to less zero. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for sharing with us the measures that taken by the company during this pandemic, so difficult time. So next question I would like to ask Mr. Hendrik about the sustainability practice of your company. Having heard that the company has a very good mission and vision of getting to net zero by 2050. So apart from these mega carbon reduction project, can you share with us the sustainability practice at your company? In particular, how does it change or enhance during this COVID period? Hendrik, please.
Thank you, Ricky. A very good question. So I guess one thing that we tend to communicate to our stakeholders and to our friends and to our colleagues is that we don't have a standalone sustainability strategy. We have a business strategy that has sustainability built in. It is core to our business strategy. So when we speak about decarbonization, when we speak about our climate vision 2050, it's a very strategic document. It really sets out a pathway for the company, but it also meets the requirements from our ESG investors. It meets the requirements from our stakeholders in the community. It meets the requirements from our regulators. So we have to make sure that what we bring forward and how we communicate that to the market, it is indeed built in. There's no sort of bolt-on. Let's have the SDGs, for instance, and let's say maybe SDG 9 and or 7 and 13. They sound good. They sound like the right ones for us. There's something we can tick the box, and let's just put that on. Let's make that our strategy. That's not how it works. That's not how business works. That's not how you do decisions in the boardroom. When you have a board of directors and they need to sign off on your pathway, on your strategy, you can't just say, well, it looks nice. It ticks all the boxes. We need to have SDGs, and let's just put that on and make it something that, I don't know, maybe greenwashing, right? It happens a lot. You have to be very, very careful with that. And I mean that truly. You have to develop a strategy that is meaningful, that is realistic, that has a pathway that you can actually explain of how you're going to get there. So many companies set targets because they think they need to. Because they think they need to set net zero because that's what the market expects. That's what you need to say at COP26. That's what you need to say when you go talk to your investors. But they have no idea how to get there. And it's shocking. It really is. It's greenwashing at its finest. We need to stop doing this. That's the only message I think I want to bring out. And thank you for asking the question. Sustainability is built into our business. That's how it works at CLP.
Thank you, Hendrik. So after hearing the response from our utility sector, so let's move on to the question for Alvin, the investment sector. The investment community is waking up to the climate risk, including the risk of stranded assets. Stranded assets are fossil fuel supply and generation resources that lose their value as a result of the transition to low carbon economy. So in your view, apart from this kind of assets, what will be the trend in the coming up that other kind of assets will be affected? So can you share with us on this?
Sure. Well, the short answer is, directly relating to, the sort of the carbon emitting sector is the auto sector is going through, a lot of changes. The traditional vehicles probably, is an asset that's going away. That's the short answer. But the more nuanced answer is that, in this new paradigm, what I was just talking about earlier, the first generation exclusion type strategy is a very blunt tool. So you basically cut off certain industries in favor of certain renewable energy or certain sectors, right? So it's a rather blunt tool, but if an asset owner is able to implement a fully integrated ESG concept, right, then the concept stewardship comes in, right? So this is actually a chance for otherwise, sort of polluters, to get back on, right? Because so a few years ago they probably were cut off, but now, when more investors adopt the fully integrated strategy, there's a chance for them to get back on to the radar screen, and be a portfolio company, and actually, so rather than just excluding them, we still invest in them, but we help them become better, slowly, right? So I think that that's a more nuanced way to approach it, right? And then already, and another point that I want to make is the unintended consequence of the blunt tools that I was mentioning is starting to filter through these days. The lack of capex in certain sectors, right? Because we're still a long way from net carbon zero, but we have been underinvesting in say oil exploration for a few years now, right? Due to environmental concerns, right? So certain sectors have had sort of below average capex for the last few years already. And as we recover from the pandemic, some of the supply shocks are short term as the global economy ramps back up, but some of it has been, the underlying the undertones has been there for a few years already, right? So now it's been exacerbated because of the recovery from the pandemic, and that's why there's such inflationary pressure in the energy market in particular. So that's why in the investment world, I think the theme these days is high interest rate or high inflation, right? So and part of it is to make up for the lack of capex in the past, and probably the culprit has been that blunt tool that I mentioned earlier, where some sectors were just completely ignored and orphaned.
Thanks, Alvin. So as you mentioned earlier, the companies has integrated ESG into the investment strategy. So when a customer come in front of you asking, okay, what would you suggest us for the coming decades will be the best opportunity that we have to invest in? So what kind of suggestion you'll give to your customers?
So you're saying, let's say a company that's currently not meeting the target, like a heavier polluter comes to us, right? I mean, I think it's the usual sort of setting realistic goals. So sort of we have to fully understand the current business model, and then set realistic target and measuring progress as well. Yeah.
So would you also mind reminding them that to get away from those like stranded assets or brown asset, that kind of investment vehicles or asset companies?
Well, I guess they if you're starting now, right, it's probably, if you're building from scratch, you want to build the new renewable and green assets. But, again, we're quite a few decades away from, complete zero carbon, right? So if they have to, they have to still pollute, they still have to build that coal-fired plant or something, yeah, then again, setting realistic target, but we want to see a declining trend. I think that's what investors would want to see. Yeah.
Thank you, Alvin. So let's move on to the questions for Dr. Kevin Choi. Throughout the pandemic, companies have taken various measures to ensure long-term viability. Entrepreneurs may struggle between investing in new areas and staying with their original business plan, waiting for an improvement in the situation. So from the academic point of view, what do you think the key consideration may be for them to go through this breakthrough?
Okay, thank you for the question. So there are two ways to think about this issue. One is more a short-term solution, and that's pretty standard supply and demand kind of thing. So at the end, ultimately, in the short run, the economy is going to be smaller. So there's a negative supply shock, partially due to real things get more expensive, logistics get more expensive, things like that, and partially is because of new regulation to kind of try to for public health purpose. So that's make things more expensive. And from the demand side, and that's going to be a negative demand shock as well, because the negative demand shock is more like kind of shifting from the market sector to the household sector. And when you have both negative supply shock and a negative demand shock, then we produce less. So the way business people react to that is that they need to think about how to scale things down. Now, initially, because a lot of businesses have some fixed costs, so when they cut payroll, and then in the short run they can do that, and they reduce output, and then later on they may need to think about whether they need to exit and things like that. So from the short-term perspective, it's more like how to think about more efficient way to scale things down, and that's kind of the more short-term solution to do it efficiently. And then in the medium term, then when things evolve over time, then there will be a shift in demand as well, as I said. So it's shift from more the market sector to the household sector. But then the household sector needs inputs to produce household goods as well. So in my own profession, as a college professor, we need to think about whether we would teach in college, meet physically, and then shift from doing things online. And I have another business doing F&B as a good example. When you do F&B, then whether you can serve the customer in the restaurants, then you need to think about whether any delivery solution or even selling inputs so that they can cook at home, things like that. So all these kind of, I would say, using kind of climate change terminology, is like more kind of how to mitigation versus adaptation, these two approaches. But then in the long run solution, I think the key is diversification, because it's the pandemic thing. I think that's gonna wake up call to a lot of people that things are whether I mean we didn't expect. I think initially it's gonna last for more than a year, and now people kind of pretty much convinced that that's gonna be we need to live with it or somehow find ways because it might come back at some point. And they need to diversify. They need to diversify, and diversification, we know that is costly because it's totally against the general economic principle of specialization. You specialize, you do things what you're good at, but then when we're living in a very highly uncertain environment, and we need to think about how to respond in a more efficient way when we got hit by another pandemic shock or climate change shock. So a lot of entrepreneurs, they need to think about plans that how to deal with those shocks. And again, there's always this kind of trade-off between these two approaches, mitigation versus adaptation. Either one is super costly, so they need to think about the right balance of that. And let me give you one more example, which is highly relevant to the power sector. So we have two experts in here, but then from the economic perspective, that we know when we switch towards more renewable, the renewable has it's different from it's due to the management is more difficult to respond to the peak load demand. And in the case of pandemic, China, for example, didn't expect the demand increase dramatically because of the shift in supply chain production. It get hit initially in China, but then they did well in terms of controlling that. But then in the Western world, they get hit later, but then they suffer a longer period of time. So a lot of the production got shipped to China, and then there's a huge increase in demand for electricity. And when we're using a lot of renewable, the way to expand supply is more challenging. So for global supply chain perspective, I think when in the energy sector in particular, when we are relying more and more on renewable, we need to find ways to make it more flexible, and I think that's a challenge that we need to think about. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Well, actually, from your response, I see a very good similarity between the COVID situation and the climate change issue, because both of them are having, on the one side, the risks, and on the other side, the opportunities. Right. So it really depends on how the companies are planning ahead of this dilemma, and to see if there are any good opportunities that they can explore to, first of all, for the survival, and for the second way is to address the concerns of the stakeholders. All right, so while we are waiting for the questions from the floor, yes, as we're moving to the Q&A session, I have one question I would like to ask the panel, is that the pandemic urges companies to re-examine the purpose of doing businesses. There has been an increasing trend where the companies are integrating UN SDGs in their corporate strategies. So to what extent would you think the companies would benefit from this integration? Maybe.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, I repeat the question again. The pandemic urges companies to re-examine their purpose of doing business. There has been an increasing trend where the companies are integrating UN SDGs into their corporate strategies. So to what extent would you think the companies would benefit from this integration?
Maybe I can just try to start a little bit. I think, and this kind of relates to your question earlier, which I didn't address, so apologies for that, but in terms of how COVID and the pandemic has impacted our business in terms of strategic priorities, there really hasn't been a fundamental shift in terms of what are the key issues that are driving our sector, that is driving our industry, that is driving CLP. But one thing that is indeed very noticeable since we've entered the pandemic is when we talk about the energy transition, when we talk about climate change, it's a sheer acceleration of pressure on the sector and on the global economy, on other markets as well, to really decarbonize much, much faster than we currently are. And maybe this relates to some of the comments you just had as well in terms of the sort of queries we get, the sort of challenges we get from our investors oftentimes bring us to the point of, well, you can't have coal in your portfolio anymore. You should be coming out of coal much faster than you already are. And it is sort of it's come to a point where some of these, the status quo of doing business is just no longer acceptable. So it really depends, and everyone has different investors and everyone has different stakeholders in the finance universe. And each one of those has very different approaches. So there is a broad spectrum of ESG investors out there, as you outlined. And so it's a matter of who is important and in that space for you and how do you respond to those demands as such. When it even comes to the provision of capital, of financing, some of the institutions are no longer able to provide financing to certain segments of the market, whether that's not just oil and gas, but even anyone who doesn't have a plan or doesn't have a credible plan. So it's just not that simple anymore. You really do have to, and this is what I was trying to get to earlier, you really do have to have a strategy that is very clear and succinct, and the COVID piece that has been, hitting us very hard. And it's not over, I don't think. Otherwise, we wouldn't be sitting here with masks and in a virtual audience. I think it really woke up a lot of people. We need to change. We really need to do things differently. And climate change is a big part of that challenge that we have and we need to address.
Thank you, Hendrik.
Let me explain a little bit. For the UN SDG, when a company to select which one is to appropriate for this company, actually is as Hendrik will know it very well, is a materiality assessment process. It's not only just the management or the board to sit inside the room to think this is good for us, this is not good for us. We have to engage with our various stakeholders and listen to them what they want from us. And from their opinion, then we will select materiality, which items is material for this company, and to validate and to review. This is a continuous reviewing process. As Henrik said, you have 3, 7, 9, 13, something like that. Okay, but you look at another company, MTR, they have made plenty. So we have a strong debate inside the boardroom or in the management that should we follow other companies, but some of us, we concentrate. This is very fundamental for our business. So as far as the UN SDGs, it's an ongoing process, and every company, I think bank sectors or other sectors also have select their own. And when you invest, you have to look into this company, is it complying with your investment strategy? Is it all that or something? If they are not, you have to talk to them hey, as you mentioned earlier, that I'll give you 3 years or 4 years to set your targets to reduce it or whatever, something like that. So actually, UN SDG is an ongoing process and I hope more companies will join this to identify and select the UN SDG that work for the company.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey.
I would like to make a small comment as well from a more macro perspective. So when we talk about sustainable investment, ESG, and we're here in Exchange Square, we tend to think, oh, this is for a big company, listed company, they can afford to do that. And I think the discussion should change a little bit so that in what ways we can help SME to help them. So when we need to, it's not, I think something we would not like to see, especially after the experience from the pandemic, is that, oh, those small firms, they can't survive. Those big firms, they deep pocket, they can stall and for a little while. So for this kind of sustainable investment, ESG, I think the community should try to, and especially the financial world, should try to help them to produce some product so that SME can have the financial assets so that they can, hey, indeed, we can sometimes pull resources together so that SME can also participate in this, and they should learn more about how to be part of the, because this is not like a few big firms thing. I hope the whole community can participate in this kind of activities. And I think the financial world, the financial sector can help a lot in terms of helping SME to be part of it.
Yeah, this is where the banking, the lending sector, the loan sector, and also the last few years we've been growing a private debt portfolio as well. So public equity and public debt tends to be larger companies that are issuing in the broadly syndicated market, but we are increasingly focusing on private debt as well, and they tend to focus on the smaller sector. And when we speak to private debt managers, they're also and one of the good things about being a private debt manager, sometimes they are a significant source of their funding. In the public sector, it's broadly syndicated, right? So there's not one important voice. Whereas if the debt lends with one private debt manager, those managers, these days, will have the capability to help their portfolio companies get up the curve as well. Yeah. And finally, from an investor's standpoint, like I mentioned earlier, we have a large pool of asset and not enough green that investable universe, that green investable universe is too small for us. So the more companies get up the curve, I think that there should be capital ready for them. Yeah.
Thanks, Alfred.
I think Alfred must have noticed some of the very leading credit rating agencies, they are starting to launch the ESG ratings. And for big companies, if they have a bad grade, then it's difficult to do financing for some projects. So this is a mandatory requirement for big companies, and also including what you mentioned, SME, to have a way forward. What is the business to do to preserve the world?
Yeah, totally agree. Especially there are some voice from the market where this kind of rating house can synchronize their methodology, uniformity, such that the investment in community can have a more clear picture of how to make the investments in the green and sustainable instruments. Okay, thank you very much. So let's take a look at the questions raised by the floor. The question 1 is, in what way can corporations conduct their own scenario assessment in order to formulate corporate decarbonization strategies in a more practical manner? So maybe may I invite Hendrik to answer this question?
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a very good question. It relates to the TCFD and the climate-related disclosures that we're all being challenged with as listed entities at the moment, or any organization for that matter. But in terms of scenario analysis, there's quite a bit of work being done in terms of trying to standardize that, and in terms of what scenarios should companies refer to when they do planning or scenario planning as such. So what usually happens is when you do climate scenario planning, you look at the dire predictions of climate unfolding, so maybe a 3 to 4 degree world with real heavy physical impacts on the communities where we operate and the wider economy. And then the flip side of that is we actually come to a 1.5 or maybe a 2-degree world where there's much, much less impact, if none, from climate. But there's a significant transition unfolding, and that's policy changes, regulatory changes, market changes, consumer expectations change. And how do you build that into a scenario of the future that is relevant to your own business? I think that's really the challenge that we're facing. We've been working, for instance, quite a bit with the WBCSD, that's the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's a global organization of leading companies in sustainability. And they've been commissioned by the TCFD to actually develop reference scenarios for the energy sector. So that includes oil and gas, it includes electric utilities, in terms of how should we envision a future that we can then measure our own business strategy against, and then report back to the market of how are we gaining from this financially, or how would we suffer from this financially. Because that's ultimately what climate-related financial disclosure is looking at and looking for. It's that forward-looking information. And quite a lot of work being done, but it is, I think, just about a challenge that every company has at the moment. But it's coming to a point where there's much more alignment on how to do that and how to communicate that to investors in particular.
Thanks, Cedric. Yeah, actually, I understand that the climate scientists are actually doing a lot of more forecasting and modeling in order to provide more information and insights of what kind of scenario may be in the coming future. So I guess in the coming future, the information on the scenario analysis that will be much more comprehensive, such that can help our stakeholders, especially the ESG practitioners, to have a more better understanding in forming their strategy in response to the climate change. All right, so question number 2 from the floor is, traditionally businesses only do good during good time. However, seems during the pandemic, ESG business outperformed non-good doers. Do you think the trend will prevail in post-pandemic?
Is that sector adjusted? Right? Because remember, earlier I mentioned the positive tilt versus best in class, right? So if it's not sector adjusted, right? You look at tech sector, the oil price crash last year. So anything to do with oil and gas crashed during the pandemic. The airlines crashed, but anything to do with tech rose, right? So if you look at the returns without adjusting for the sectors in the index, then it's easy to say, oh, okay, the ones with a higher ESG score outperform the lower ones because you have a sector bias there. But if you adjust for it, right, then I haven't looked at the numbers in details, but let's say we control for just within the oil and gas sector, just within the airline sector, just within the tech sector, how do the returns compare?
Thank you, Alvin. So, Dr. Choi, do you have anything to add in this aspect?
I've seen some studies some academic studies arguing that investment in ESG is going to help you build the reputation so that when there's negative shock, especially company level shock or even sector level shock, and those firms, they perform better, outperform, because it's just like building your reputation that you care about in the bigger picture kind of thing. So I think in the long run that's a good thing to do, and that's good financial return as well. Yeah.
All right. So, anything want to add for these questions? No? Okay, then we still have time for the third question. In your opinion, how government can help in the developing sustainable economy in Hong Kong? So it's a very broad questions. Yeah, maybe as practitioner, we can provide some recommendation for the government to consider.
I think the low-hanging fruit is, they've actually come out and said they will issue more green bonds, and we need more of it because there's there's too much money chasing after not enough supply.
Yeah.
Right. So there, but so it's a good start, But I think the government related entities should do the same and grow that part of the bond market as well.
Okay. Jeffrey?
I wish the government, Hong Kong government in particular, can support the utilization of green hydrogen because at this moment, hydrogen is considered as a dangerous goods rather than a fuel. So they have to change the mindset, because hydrogen bus, hydrogen tram, hydrogen train has been running over another part of the world. They have a lot of safety case studies, and Power Assets actually is a member of the Hydrogen Council, which is more than 100 companies, global leading companies that have the same visions to foster green hydrogen as an alternative fuel in the future. So we work with governments and we work with institutions and companies along the entire value chain, from production, transportation to utilization. And we wish the Hong Kong government can have some senior officers to help to promote the green hydrogen, because as you know, transportation sector is using 25% of the fuel. Only the utilities, the power company cannot help the world. Actually, we are just contributing 20 to 30% of the fossil carbon emissions. The rest are on other industries, and heavy industries and transportations.
Thanks, Jeffrey. So the Q&A session is almost come to an end. So I believe that you would agree that we have had a very good discussion among our panelists. And we have covered a number of subjects, including the recovery from pandemic, investing in technology, and most important thing is how to respond to the climate change. So to conclude, though we have not been able to completely walk away from COVID, but I guess with the climate change issues that is still hanging around, we still have a long way to go in order to attain the long-term sustainability. So finally, once again, I'd like to thank our panelists for your time and also for your sharing of your insights and knowledge. So with that, I would like to call a stop for this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much once again to our panelists here on stage. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And of course, thank you, Mr. Ricky Jiang, for moderating the session for us. Thank you.